For today's main topic, we are going to be wrapping up our conversation on frugality. Frugality being, again, one last time, the intentional practice of prudent economy. Today, we're going to be discussing economy. Economy, in this context, is getting the most happiness or utility per dollar out of your spending, out of your budget. When you spend money, you're going to be buying things that bring you joy. You're also going to be buying some things that bring you more joy than other things. When it comes to utility, there are things that are going to be more useful to you than other things. You may need all of them, but some things are going to need a little bit more emphasis than others. So, with there being a variety, some give and take, how do you know what is going to be able to maximize your joy for dollars spent? One very effective way that we can optimize the happiness or utility per dollar that we're spending is to consider the 80-20 rule. The 80-20 rule was something that was discovered by an economist a long time ago. The idea of the 80-20 rule is that in nature, things settle into the 80-20 ratio for no apparent reason other than it's just nature. A good example is going to be that 20% of the carpet in your house gets about 80% of the traffic. That kind of makes sense if you think about it. The carpet on the edges of rooms and hallways and corners aren't getting walked on. And you in your day-to-day and your family, as you walk through the house, are probably going to follow some very similar pathing. There's also a good chunk of carpet that gets covered by furniture. Is it exactly 80-20? No, probably not. But that's a good rule. And that's a good example of the rule. Another example of the rule is that about 20% of the workers at a given firm are producing about 80% of the production. 20% of your day equals 80% of the productivity that you yourself are able to do, while 80% of your day goes into the last 20%. It's really interesting to think about this from an efficiency perspective and a happiness perspective. When it comes to you spending your money, the first 80% of your happiness that you get comes from the first 20% of your spending. If you buy something that makes you 80% of the way happy or meets 80% of what you want to do with that particular thing, then you're probably going to be spending less than half, probably closer to 20% of what you would spend on something that would fulfill all of your wants or all of your joy. An example for me, before my wife and I were engaged, before we were thinking about wedding planning, we talked about cars. I really like cars. If it wasn't clear from the last episode, I get car fever easy. My wife could care less about cars. My dream car is an Aston Martin DBS from the 1960s. I would want it to be silver, and I want it to be practically perfect. A car like this, a collector's item, could run me in and around $300,000. A brand new Aston Martin DBS from 2023 could probably run me even more than that. That's a lot of money to put into a car. It's a lot of money to be putting into a toy. It's a lot of money to put into something that is going to sit there and not provide me a whole lot of utility. You're not really using this thing to be running errands and stuff. You have this because you want it. You have this because you want a fun car. Okay, I say you, me. This is why I want the Aston Martin. It's true. That's everything that I could want in a dream car. That is the dream car for me. However, I would probably get as much joy out of another car that would cost me a lot less. A good example would be a 3-year-old Corvette that has low mileage and has been babied to death. A car like that would probably run me closer to $50,000 to $60,000, maybe $80,000 if it's something special. But that's going to be a lot less money. If I find a good used Corvette for about $60,000 and the dream car, the Aston Martin, costs $300,000, the Corvette's going to cost me about 20%. And it would be, a really fun, cool toy that I absolutely don't need that's going to turn heads and I'm going to really enjoy driving. When I push the button or turn the key, however it starts, and that thing kicks on and that engine starts to purr, I'm going to get about the same amount of feeling. It might not be exactly the same as the Aston Martin, but it's going to be most of the way there. That's being economical with your money. That's being efficient with your money. That's being frugal with your money. Frugal isn't necessarily being cheap and not spending money on anything that you want. Cheap and frugal are very different. There was a TLC TV show, and there was a lady who was featured on the show that would wrap a lasagna that she put together and cook it in the dishwasher with the dirty dishes so that she wouldn't have to run the oven at the same time as the dishwasher. She would also turn off the TV anytime there was a break for ads, even if there was a football party going on and she had guests over. The same lady also only owned one light bulb in her whole house. In order to save on the electric bill, she would take that one light bulb room to room and just screw it into the socket in the room where she currently was, so that she wasn't forgetting to turn lights off somewhere else. And by only using one lamp, one light bulb, she wasn't spending near as much money as she would if the room was properly illuminated. This is being cheap. In my opinion, for most of us, that would be working an awful lot more in order to save money. That's doing 80% of the effort to save the last 20% of the money, while being frugal would be putting about 20% of the effort in to make 80% of the savings that you possibly could. You may be asking, how often is the 80-20 rule actually right? How often is this 80-20 rule accurate as a good rule of thumb? And my answer would be about 80% of the time. With this in mind, we want to be economical. We want to be efficient. We don't necessarily want to be cheap. Being cheap errs on the side of sacrificing our happiness for the sake of saving money. And if it's just for the sake of saving money, and it's not for an emergency, we're being cheap for the sake of being cheap, it might be rooted in the love of money. And remember, the love of money, not money itself, but the love of money is the root of all evil. That pretty much wraps up our entire understanding of frugality. Frugality, for those pursuing their hope-filled financial future, is the fundamental virtue for all personal financial decisions. The intentional practice of prudent economy is going to guide you as you reflect back upon it. It's going to guide you to making the wisest, healthiest, most efficient decisions. And while you may need to say no to some things, while you might need to say not yet to other things, while you can't get everything you want now living frugally, you can optimize your happiness and your joy. Even saying no, having healthy boundaries with your money is going to lead you to overall having a happier and more effective financial life. It's really cool. It's what I want for you. It's what I strive for myself every day. And I want to help you through this podcast achieve genuine frugality day in and day out. Next week, we're going to be going through an article that talks about how the insane interest rates in our current economy is impacting you. Is this article accurate or not? We'll find out next week. Until then, budget bravely and enjoy your hope-filled financial future.